CDOT rightly points the blame at drivers for a lot of winter crashes. What happens when they're responsible for a wreck? Dueling election bills at the Capitol. Democrats try to block people convicted of election crimes from running elections. Republicans try to get rid of voting by mail. A Coloradan's escape from Ukraine.
The next morning at 4:30, there was a very loud explosion, much louder than day one. It was clearly closer and seemed bigger.
And 2 years ago today, we said something about the pandemic that was very hopeful and very foolish. All that is next. Colorado's winter crashes usually happen despite CDOT's best efforts. They closed Loveland Pass on Saturday because of high winds and blowing snow. That was a day too late for a couple of drivers who actually blame CDOT for their crash on the pass. Our Marshall Zellinger looks at what happens when it is the government and not us drivers being blamed for a crash.
It is a 2-second snapshot slowed down. This is from Loveland Pass around 2 p.m. on Friday, just before CDOT stopped the snow plowing it began earlier that morning.
It was shooting a bunch of snow right into my lane.
You don't see her car in this image, but Lena Heyer was driving toward the screen, eastbound, back to the metro area.
The biggest issue was just that they were sending the snow completely into my lane, so I obviously couldn't see anything.
Everything went dark, thought I got hit by an avalanche, didn't know what it was, and then bam, hit the guy in front of me, and then people behind me, bam, bam, bam.
Dylan Roop rear-ended Lena.
Just no warning and no way to avoid it.
So who is responsible?
You have to demonstrate liability on the part of the state.
Doug Platt is the spokesman for the state's risk management office. You know, the people you want to pay for the damage when you hit a pothole on a state highway. There is a claim form to fill out online. Basic information: name, address, email, state agency, when it happened, what happened, how much it cost. It is a similar process to hitting a pothole in a city. For instance, in Denver. If you think the city should pay for your pothole damage, you can fill out a similar claim form. But when it comes to potholes on a city road or state highway, to have a decent shot at getting your claim paid, the pothole would have had to have been known, reported, and not fixed.
The Governmental Immunities Act asks that the state repair potholes within a reasonable period of time.
You know, I'm pretty pragmatic. You hit a pothole, you know what happens, but this type of thing seemed very avoidable to me.
140 people filed claims against the state for potholes last year. None were paid. There were accident claims filed, meaning someone wanted to be reimbursed for damage caused by a state employee driving. 59 of 93 of those, Kyle, those were paid out, but not the pothole ones.
So be a good neighbor, report potholes.
Report your potholes. If you're in Denver, 311. You can call it in. You can put it online on PocketGov. So far, Denver in the last 2 months has received 739 pothole complaints. DOT, Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, is supposed to fix those within 1 to 3 days. That's what they say.
Yep.
And I guess if it's not fixed after that, you won't know when you hit it. But if you can prove, or if the city or the state finds out after the fact, oh, well, we knew about it for 5 days, then maybe you would win. But first, call it in, have someone else call it in, file your claim, see what happens.
I like when people plant flowers in them. It's too early for that. It's too early in the season for that. But I love when people do that. It's very decorative. Thank you, Marshall. City of Boulder is going to upgrade its emergency alert system, upgrade it to a process that will no longer require people to opt in for alerts. This will provide blanket phone notifications for cell phones and landlines within a given area. Boulder County says it's going to add that system in early April. We've talked about how Boulder County had access to a system like that prior to the Marshall fire, but it wasn't working. They said pandemic-related delays had stalled its implementation. It's been 10 weeks since that fire, and homeowners still have big debris piles on their properties. Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse got an earful about that issue from residents today. Main complaint at his roundtable was the stalemate over the debris removal. There's a conservative talk radio host suing the county, saying that the bidding process for debris removal was not transparent. The Boulder County Commissioners were asked to talk about that today, but they said they've been advised not to discuss it. Boulder County's asking a judge to dismiss a lawsuit from former FEMA administrator and radio host Michael Brown. He said today that it's Boulder County that is to blame for the delay because they didn't sign a contract yet, and that he's just a scapegoat. We'll close on this about the fire. A beautiful sign of renewal inside the Marshall Fire burn area. Brandy says her mom and dad's place burned down in Louisville. They'd lived there on Turnberry Circle and Coal Creek Ranch for about 30 years. They were there at the burned out house on Sunday and saw the tulips coming up through the charred ground. Democrats and Republicans laid out differing visions for election security improvements in Colorado today. Republican plan would eliminate early voting and voting by mail. A Democratic plan would try to keep people convicted of election-related crimes from running elections. The Democrats' plan would require elected officials not have a prior conviction for an election offense. Right now, you can still run for office in Colorado if you're charged or convicted of crimes. And the bill forbids making images of election server hard drives without permission from the Secretary of State. A Republican bill addressing election security is expected to die in committee because Democrats have the majority. Representative Ron Hanks, who's also running for the U.S. Senate, his bill would require in-person voting, would require so-called anti-fraud paper ballots, and the results of elections would need to be turned around within 24 hours of the close of polls. Former Republican Secretary of State Wayne Williams told Next back in February that a hand-count election in a large jurisdiction with the results the next day would be impossible. June 25th of last year, Stephen Brown and his 13-year-old son, Gaina, left their home in Highlands Ranch for a year-long visit to Kyiv, Ukraine. They'd hoped to spend some time there so that Gina could learn about his birthplace and more about his mother's side of the family. They decided that an apartment in Kyiv with a school nearby would provide the cultural experience they were looking for. 8 months into their journey, they woke up to the sound of war. Photojournalist Tom Cole talked with them about their escape.
This was to pay our rent mostly.
Stephen Brown left Kiev with a lot of Ukrainian cash,
Our landlord only wanted to be paid in cash.
a few mementos,
These are the only things I really have anymore.
and he left with his son.
The morning of the 24th, I woke at 5:30 to the sound of explosions, and it was clear what they were. So, and I knew we waited too long.
From their apartment on the 20th floor with no stairs, the hope was the elevator wouldn't shut down and they could grab their suitcases for the hour walk to the bus station. At this point, all flights were canceled.
The air raid siren probably started half an hour later. It was like we'd been dropped into a World War II movie, like I said. It was just a surreal, this can't be happening kind of sound, and what am I supposed to be doing kind of sound.
Genna's experience for culture got very real, very quick.
Going on. There are many conflicts around the world, and it was an eye-opening experience for me to be able to be part of a conflict and realize what kinds of situations there are in other parts of the world. I was very concerned at some points because there were many risks to our escape.
The biggest risk for this father-son duo was the fact that Genna is a Russian citizen. Had they been caught by the Russian military,
They probably would have kept me in the country, I believe, if they took over Kyiv. And that was the one part that kind of scared me, because my dad, he would be fine to leave, but they might try to keep me in.
what was supposed to be a 10-hour bus ride turned into a 37-hour history lesson on the early days of the Russian attack on Ukraine.
It feels dreamlike, almost, that the whole thing happened.
They successfully crossed the border in Poland and made their way to Colorado.
Good to be home.
For Next, I'm Tom Cole.
Stephen said he wanted to share his family's story because he's seen now how hard it was to rebuild their lives here. He said he could only imagine how much harder it will be for Ukrainians who are resettled without resources or a support system. Our full conversation with Stephen is posted on the Next YouTube page. So many of you have been asking for a recommendation of a Colorado-based nonprofit that is helping Ukrainians. There's a lot of groups that are willing to help and are working on things. And what I've been looking for the last couple of weeks is a group that is also able to get aid into Ukraine. We found them, and that Word of Thanks campaign is going to begin this Wednesday. I want to mention huge appreciation for what you did last week through Word of Thanks, raising almost $25,000 to help the YMCA of Northern Colorado provide a summer camp experience for kids who lost their homes in the Marshall Fire. Our work to help the Coloradans who are helping Ukraine begins on Wednesday. The outcome was inevitable, yet debate on an abortion bill stretched nearly 24 hours at the state capitol. Could have been cut off sooner, but wasn't, for a reason. Up close and personal, with a lot of ice.
For this one, I really wanted to bring photography and just focus on like the beauty of the ice and give this experience of what it's like to be there, but also just try to capture some of the massive change that's occurring.
The Coloradan brings the impact of climate change home. Next. The Denver Performing Arts Complex is about to drop some of the strictest COVID rules in town. Since last fall, Colorado Ballet, Colorado Symphony, Opera Colorado, and DCPA have all required proof of vaccination, masks at all performances. Starting Monday, March 28th, no more vax or test requirement at DCPA, and masks will be optional. You'll also be able to bring your drinks into venues again. Colorado Ballet is making a similar change next Monday, the 21st. The changes for Opera Colorado and the Symphony went into effect today. Numbers are looking really good, honestly. Colorado's test positivity rate is below 3% for the first time since July. 2.9% of COVID tests done by the state over the last 7 days have come back positive. It was 2 years ago today, the start of the pandemic, when I wrote, "When this is over, we should have parades for healthcare workers like we did for firefighters and police after 9/11. Seems pretty naive now to think about COVID being over, or at least over as quickly as it began. If over is an endemic virus that we learn to live with, we'll certainly take that. But how about that parade? We did a pretty admirable job early on letting healthcare workers know how much they mattered. Those nightly howls, banging pots and pans, the signs you'd see outside hospitals, all the free meals. But the pandemic wore on, and we wore out. So healthcare workers got a new parade. A parade of angry patients denying why they were dying. Accusations that they were faking COVID cases for money. Death threats. Doxing. The thanks that healthcare workers got for saving lives. Colorado lost the population of Steamboat Springs to the pandemic. Or all of Lone Tree, or all of Superior, if that's easier to picture. A whole city's worth of people gone. But the fact that 2 years later, I can't imagine us coming together for a parade for healthcare workers, that suggests we've lost something else.
Well, it was a little bit cooler today with a high in the mid-50s for us here in Denver, some 60s for us into the southeast part of the state. But tonight, actually a bit warmer than average with those low temperatures dropping down into the upper 20s, seasonably comfortable, but again, a little bit warmer than average. And speaking of warmer than average, high tomorrow of 68 degrees. That'll be 12 degrees above where we should be for this time of year. And statewide, we're cooking. Look at this for us here in southeast Colorado. A few 70s popping on up, even in the mountains. A bluebird day if you're skiing up there. But of course, it's going to come to a change or come to an end as we get into your Wednesday and your Thursday. With rain flipping over to snow, a few wet inches of snow possible in Denver for your Thursday morning. Warmer next weekend.
A Republican state legislator lost control of his firearm at the Capitol today. A fellow Republican tells us that State Rep Richard Holtorf was literally running to a vote when he fell and his gun went flying. Yes, legislators are allowed to carry at the Capitol. Citizens cannot. Holtorf, who's from Akron, is best known at the Capitol for shooting from the lip, calling a colleague of color buckwheat and telling a colleague whose son was killed in the Aurora Theater shooting that he needed to let it go. There's a marathon, 24-hour debate at the state capitol over abortion rights this weekend. The bill, sponsored by Democrats, adds the existing abortion rights to state law, just in case Roe gets tossed out by the Supreme Court. That bill advanced on Saturday. A day's worth of debate, including an overnight, that the majority Democrats did not attempt to shorten.
There's a saying that the majority gets their way, so the minority gets their say. And I think that we absolutely have to hear from all sides of the debate, no matter what the debate is. No matter who's in the majority or who's in the minority, we've never cut off the conversation. We've never stopped the minority from having their voice heard.
After another 3 hours of debate today, that bill passed its third reading, heads to the Senate next, where it's expected to pass.
It's really mind-blowing. So I want to convey a little bit of that awesomeness.
Step right up, Colorado, and take a look at a beautiful glacier before it's gone. That's next. Not too long, the trees are going to be leafing out in green just like that. Hey, you don't have to head to the far ends of the earth to feel what it's like to be on a glacier. You just go to CU. Brian Wendland met a man who experienced the cold and solitude firsthand, so you can too.
I've been interested for a long time, and Greenland was really on the top of my list.
Inside the Jerry Crail Johnson Earth Sciences and Map Library.
For this one, I really wanted to bring photography and just focus on like the beauty of the ice.
You can be transported to a Greenland glacier through the eyes of PhD graduate Chris Dunn.
There's this sensual aspect that I really wanted to bring forth.
The exhibit starts at the top of the glacier. As you wind down the stairs and into the library's lower floor, you enter the glacial crevices and pop out at the bottom as ice melts into the sea.
It's really mind-blowing, and so I want to convey a little bit of that awesomeness.
Dunn's Greenland expedition was funded through Nest Studio for the Arts.
And it's intended to look at the way artists and scientists can collaborate.
Joanne Guillory is Nest's manager. She says because of COVID, Dunn was largely on his own.
He took so many photos and made so many videos that it was really kind of difficult to kind of get it together.
Dunn did have some help from a couple PhD students working on ocean temperatures and elevation mapping.
I'm mostly the artist, but I do bring in a pretty big heap of academic knowledge.
And while Dunn does say environmental awareness is really important,
it's deliberately not a climate change awareness exhibit.
What he really wants this project to do is make people feel what it's like to be in his shoes, standing on top of, or inside, these glaciers.
Some of this stuff is so big and so unique. It's like these crazy features and just so many different forms and varieties.
For Next, I'm Brian Wendland.
It's a sign about the stuff that my daughter calls Hanitizer. That's a better name than its real name. That plus your feedback next. It's a sign that the sting marks the spot. Hand sanitizer dispensers kind of dot our lives now. Chuck was at the Costco in Arvada last week and he saw this one labeled paper cut locator. You slather some on, you feel that burny burn. It works every single time. Send us the signs that make you look twice you want to share with your neighbors. Take a pic and email it to next@9news.com or use the hashtag HeyNext on Twitter. Good amount of feedback tonight about the fact that we talked about 2 years ago tonight. We're talking about the idea that when COVID was over, we should hold a parade for healthcare workers the way that we did for police and firefighters after 9/11. Ron Ruggiero from SEIU Local 105 dropped a note to say, as the president of the largest union of healthcare employees in Colorado, I can say there has been the opposite of parades. William wrote into us about his wife, a nurse, saying past 2 years have been real. The death, denial, surges that came over and over, the breaking point and the tears. She gets up every morning and continues. William says most people have no idea, none. Becky writes in to say, as an ER nurse who has worked through the pandemic, I am tired. Thank you for speaking up for us. Keep the messages coming. We read every one. I'll see you next time.